Your CPU upgrade path doesn't matter at all. It never did. But now that I've got your attention, I wanted to talk a little bit about why it doesn't matter and the notion that we've all got in our heads that we need an upgrade path and a way forward. Because I've got some interesting bits of questions that I asked a bunch of you guys to find out if that is in fact the reality of an enthusiast and a gamer.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDkey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDkey.com for a tenth of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
Typically when we do a motherboard video like this, I'll just do the motherboard and I'll show you all the features. But when I was looking at the feature set of this board, it really got me thinking about features of motherboards as a whole and upgrade paths, because everyone is so dead set on saying, hey, look, this 1851 socket is a dead platform because Intel is going to release a new socket later down the line. And by that, I mean pretty soon, if I'm being honest. But the argument that I've seen across asking many people and just seeing feedback from you guys as well is AM4 has been around for ages, man. Like, it's so important because the upgrade path for AM4 was so amazing. Was it? Was it really? Because if we look at the first two generations of AM4, you'll find that AM4 in those two generations miss AM4's killer feature. I bet you guys can't figure out what it is yet. PCIe Gen 4. Both X370 and X470 did not officially or technically support PCIe Gen 4. And why this is important is it took about 3.5 years for AM4 to pick up steam to a point where it was a really stable and viable platform. Now, people are gonna be like, oh, it was good from the beginning. It was okay. There were a lot of memory compatibility issues that we saw with X370 and B350. Now, I'm not trying to sound like an Intel shield. This is just what happened. Like, this is just the chronology of the situation. From my memory, when I first got an AM4 system, when it first launched, it was cool and new, but next generation, the Ryzen 2000 processors, it got a lot better very, very quickly. But as I always say, guys, a lot of this stuff takes time. Why all of this is anything I'm even bothering to talk about is kind of in relation to socket 1851. The argument that I've seen with people and these relatively new boards is there's no upgrade path. Who cares? Look at the features of this chipset and what you're getting and what is currently available on the market. Because from asking a whole bunch of you guys questions, from asking friends and other YouTubers questions about their realistic timeframes of upgrade paths, they say their gaming system will last them between 3 to 5 years. So if you were to build with this right now for a regular person, you would be hanging on to this board for at least 3 to 5 years because the feature set of this Z890 chipset is, if I'm being honest, pretty darn good, right? And that's kind of a conclusion at the start of the video. If we go back and look at the X370 chipset, it did what it did at the time and that was it. Then we got X470, it was a little bit better, but only when X570 and B550 came along with AMD did we get that killer feature, PCIe Gen 4. We get comments every single day on all of our old motherboard content saying, hey, I just bought this board and it's awesome. And it's always boards from generations previously. And your argument could be, hey, look, it's the AI thing and the memory is really expensive. That's somewhat true, but the reality is a lot of people aren't thinking about that upgrade path at all. From our testing with these new Intel Plus CPUs that we did whenever they came out, we saw that the uplift with this refresh was justification enough to hold on to Z890 and B860 for a little bit longer, right? Okay, now I'm done yapping. Let's take a look at this board from ASUS, because I think if you're gonna be using a board, especially like this one with its feature set, you'll be hanging on to this one for a while, right? Not every single person watches these videos and comments about their system and the upgrade path that they're going to have moving forward, because what we found is it's the vocal minority who leave those comments. So don't let it put you guys off.
All right, here it is, the ROG Strix Z890i gaming Wi-Fi. The main reason why we're covering this board now is because with these new Core Ultra Plus CPUs, you guys have asked us to take a look at this board because it is one that we missed. So let's get the motherboard out of the way so we can take a bit of a look at all of the things that come with this board. And to be honest, there's quite a bit. First of all, we've got the ROG Hive 2. Now, I have complained about this in the past, but to be honest, this is a pretty intelligent way of adding an audio interface that's external, but also kind of internal to the motherboard, as well as a power button, an additional flex key, and some more USB ports to your system. While, again, I do have some issue with this, I can see the need for it because mini ITX boards are only a certain size, and there's just some things that you cannot add to a board if you want to squeeze this many features into a board like this. Speaking of, there is the little add-in card. This has two USB 2.0 ports, the front panel connector for all the lights and all the wiring. There's also a 4-pin 12-volt RGB header. There's the clear CMOS header, as well as two SATA or SATA ports for your 2.5-inch SSDs or your 3.5-inch drives. And then there's two connectors which plug this card into the board, which provide the connectivity, which I'll show in just a moment. There's also a bunch of documentation here. This is pretty standard stuff, as well as explaining how the Hive works and how you can connect it up. It's basically just a USB Type-C cable. And there's a Wi-Fi antenna for the built-in Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth. There's all of the other cables here. You've got some cable ties. You've got a USB Type-C cable for the Hive 2. You have some SATA or SATA cables. You also have a bunch of breakout cables if that's something that you're interested in or if it's something you're going to use. And yeah, that's really it in terms of cables and whatnot that's included. There's also an ROG keychain, which is pretty standard for all of these ROG boards. But finally, let's get that motherboard out and unsheath it so we can take a bit of a closer look, because to be honest, this is a very, very interesting feature pack board. And just to kind of reiterate what I talked about in the intro, another thing that I think I missed talking about was the fact that if a CPU socket is around for too long, it also holds a platform back because the socket may not be technically capable of doing what it needs to do in the future as well. So sometimes a new socket is required. We see this quite often with Threadripper boards. But anyway, let's take out this little thumb screw because this one will reveal a little fan bracket. This one will hold either a 30mm fan or a 40mm fan if you need additional cooling for the chipset and M.2 slots on this board, which leads me into storage on this board. Removing that thumb screw then allows us to pop open this clip here. We need to remove another screw, and then we can pull out this entire card. Yeah, this is a card, guys. This has got two M.2 slots on it that slots in kind of like a mezzanine board that we've seen with other ASUS boards. And let's take a look at this again. Unclipping this, it opens up kind of like a reverse Lambo doors, I would say. And then there's two M.2 slots. Both of these M.2 slots are PCIe Gen 5 M.2 slots. They're also by 4 M.2 slots. There's active cooling that helps to cool this via the I/O cover. But I've got to be honest, guys, I really like this on a mini ITX board for storage because it is creative and hyper functional. It's really cool. And I wish we saw more of this on mini ITX boards, which is why I'm covering this board now. Speaking of sockets, which I'm kind of harping on about now, I wanted to show you guys how to get into the socket and how to socket a CPU while we're here. You want to push the lever down and then to the right to release the retention system. Open the socket from the top, pulling it towards you. And then you want to drop the CPU into the socket with the text facing upwards. There's also a little arrow in the corner which indicates that it needs to be in the bottom left. put it in the socket, give her a little wiggle, then close the retention system, pull the handle down, and the socket cover will fly off and almost slap you in the face. And Bob's your dad's brother, you've installed an Intel CPU. The reason why I took the heatsink off so early was to reveal some of the headers. Now, there's a PWM fan header kind of underneath it, as well as two 3-pin 5V addressable RGB headers. As for the rest of the headers on the board, there's those two USB Type-C looking connectors, which is used for the additional board, as well as a USB Type-C front panel header, a USB Type-A front panel header, and then the 24-pin power connector to send power to your motherboard. If we go back to this board, I'll quickly show you how it connects. I won't push it all the way in, but essentially what you want to do, you want to line up those kind of USB-C connectors. I mean, it's technically USB-C, but it's not wired that way, and you want to push it down and plug it in, and Bob's your dad's brother again. In terms of PCIe slots, there's a single PCIe Gen 5 by 16 slot for your graphics card. As for the VRM layout on this board, it features a 10+2+1+1 phase VRM layout with 110 amp power stages. You'll notice that the entire I/O cover is a heatsink for that, and the top heatsink is connected to that via a heat pipe, which you can see that is sandwiched right in the middle there somewhere, right? You can see it, it's right there. The VRM layout is also actively cooled. There is an intake on the top of the I/O cover and it exhausts straight out the back, which you can see kind of by these little vents here on the top of the I/O cover. This board features standard socket 1151 cooler mounting, which is the same as LGA 1700 as well. So, you know, nothing too new or exotic going on, even with this outgoing socket. Flipping the board over, you can see that there's not much going on other than the backplate for the socket itself, as well as a backplate on the board, which does help to dissipate heat across the backside of the board. It's not for cosmetic reasons, guys. It's to help with thermal performance. There are two DDR5 DIMM slots on this board, which will support up to a total of 128 gigs of memory at up to 9200 mega transfers overclocked. And this board also does support QDIMM memory too, if you could buy it. As for rear I/O, you've got two USB 2.0 ports, an HDMI 2.1 port, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, a 5 gigabit USB Type-A port, two Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 20 gigabit USB Type-C port. This one is also used for the Hive 2. There's some 10 gigabit USB Type-A ports, as well as a port that is used for BIOS flashback, two antenna connectors for the built-in Wi-Fi 7, the BIOS flashback button, as well as an indicator light. And the keynote out there will also see the fan that is used to help cool both the chipset and M.2 slots.
All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this little guy here, the ASUS ROG Strix Z890i gaming Wi-Fi. And I know I rattled on and ranted a little bit about sockets and all this stuff, but the conclusion is this. This board here is $450 US, around about 550 Aussie dollars at the time of filming. Yeah, it's an outgoing chipset, and I know it might not be in your best interest to upgrade right now or just buy anything new right now because of AI and basically anything else that's going on in the world that is terrible. But if you are looking at building a PC right now, this motherboard, especially if you're into small form factor, the feature set is bloody fantastic. This is one of the best MITX boards, yes, MITX, I'm going to say it, mini ITX boards that I have seen in a very long time, regardless of whether or not it's AM5 or this Intel socket. The feature set here is great, except it is missing a couple things, and here's where I need to be super objective. The amount of USB ports on this board is criminal. There's only like 4, and heaps of USB-C, which is usually fine for most people. I'm also filming this about 7 hours after whatever you saw before because I've had time to look at the footage and really think about what I said to kind of form what I was trying to say earlier. But look, the board's good. And again, like maybe upgrade paths matter to you, but realistically, they don't, because you are holding on to hardware for quite a long time. Regular consumers do hold on to hardware for up to 5 years. And even if you're buying a motherboard at the start of a generation, even with AMD, for instance, there's nothing to say that you're going to have the privilege of having an upgrade path going forward in the future, because I think I mentioned this, but the chipset is actually the most important thing with all of that, because as you saw with X370, X470, they didn't have PCIe Gen 4, then X570, B550 came, we got PCIe Gen 4, and then that lasted for 2 generations before it was out the door. So I don't think it's really fair to say that AM4 socket compatibility is amazing and whatnot, because that right there, AM4, it's still going to this day, and it's almost 10 years now. That is a massive anomaly for tech. I've never seen anything like that before. We are used to changing sockets every 2 or so years, and like I said, guys, that's an absolute privilege that AMD has given us that. So I've got to give props to AMD for that, because AM4 lived for probably 6 years longer than they would have liked, because they said 2020 initially that they were going to can it. And to be fair, around 2022 is when we saw Ryzen 7000 and a new socket come along. So who's to say that, you know, we might not get another year out of AM5 or whatever, which means, I mean, they say things, but what they do is completely different. We'll just like quickly just loop back to this. Let's say 2027 is the cutoff and you upgraded in 2022 and they're going, let's say AM6 in 2027. I'm just spitballing here. That's 5 years and then a new socket. So your upgrade path didn't matter anyway, right? So that's the reality of all of this. Is what I'm trying to say is it doesn't really matter when you buy or what you buy. It's what you need right at that time, because you don't buy for the promise of technology in the future. You buy for what you need right now, right? If you need to game and you need hardware or you need something for a certain task right now, that's what should matter, not what you should be able to upgrade to in the future, because you don't have a crystal ball and we can't tell. Companies lie to us every single day. That's why this channel exists, right? It's our job to find the truth of the situation, and the truth that we've seen so far from AMD at least is, hey, they're happy to hang on to sockets, and Intel, they don't hang on to sockets for as long at all. They haven't, and that's, people think this is a new thing, but this has been Intel from the jump. Look at Pentium 4. They had like 3 different sockets for Pentium 4 when it launched, right? AMD did the same thing when Athlon 64 launched. They launched it on 2 sockets at the same time. So they didn't say like what was going to outlast one or the other. It just is what it is. And that's it.